Have you ever heard of a thief who successfully stole a priceless masterpiece, only to use it as a bargaining chip for a charitable cause? Imagine a crime so audacious, yet so peculiar that it baffled the greatest detectives of Scotland Yard and captivated the entire British public. This was not the work of a sophisticated international crime syndicate or a cat burglar with high-tech gadgets. This was the work of an unassuming man who simply wanted to make a point about social justice. The story we are about to unravel is one of the most bizarre chapters in the history of art theft. It challenges our understanding of criminal intent and leaves us questioning who the real heroes and villains are in the annals of history. The year was 1961, and the setting was the prestigious National Gallery in London. This institution stood as a beacon of culture and history, housing some of the most significant works of art in the Western world. Among its vast collection was a newly acquired portrait that had caused quite a stir in the press and Parliament. The painting was the portrait of the Duke of Wellington by the renowned Spanish artist Francisco Goya. It was a small but powerful image of the Iron Duke himself. The British government had recently purchased this painting for the staggering sum of £140,000 to prevent it from being sold to an American collector. The acquisition of the Goya painting was a matter of national pride, but it also sparked a heated debate about government spending. While the wealthy elite celebrated the salvation of this cultural treasure, many working-class citizens struggled to make ends meet. The contrast between the exorbitant price tag of the painting and the financial hardships of the common man created a tension that hung in the air like a thick London fog. It was within this climate of economic disparity that the stage was set for a crime that would humiliate the security forces of the United Kingdom. The National Gallery was supposed to be a fortress, but it had a fatal weakness that one man would exploit. On the morning of August 21, 1961, the guards at the National Gallery made a horrifying discovery. As they patrolled the hallowed halls, they approached the display where the Duke of Wellington had proudly hung just the day before. To their utter disbelief, the space on the wall was empty. The painting was gone. There were no shattered windows, no tripped alarms, and no signs of a forced entry. It was as if the painting had simply vanished into thin air. The initial confusion quickly turned to panic as the reality of the situation set in. The portrait of the Duke of Wellington had been stolen right from under their noses. Scotland Yard was immediately notified, and detectives swarmed the gallery. They dusted for fingerprints, interviewed staff, and scoured the building for any clue that might lead them to the perpetrator. The media frenzy was instantaneous. Newspapers splashed the story across their front pages, declaring it the theft of the century. The public was both shocked and secretly amused by the incompetence of the security measures. How could a painting of such immense value be taken so easily? The police suspected a professional gang of art thieves, perhaps hired by an unscrupulous private collector, who wanted the Goya for their own secret enjoyment. As the investigation dragged on, the authorities hit dead end after dead end. They alerted ports and airports, fearing the painting would be smuggled out of the country. Interpol was brought in to coordinate with police forces around the world. Every known art thief and fence was questioned, but no one knew anything. The criminal underworld was just as baffled as the police. It seemed that the thief was a ghost, operating completely outside the usual circles of organized crime. The silence from the thief was deafening, and the pressure on Scotland Yard mounted with each passing day. Then came the first communication. A letter arrived not at Scotland Yard, but at the offices of a news agency. The envelope contained a ticket for the left luggage office at a railway station. When police rushed to the station, they found the heavy frame of the painting, but the canvas itself was missing. The letter that followed was even more surprising. It was written in block capitals and demanded a ransom. However, this was not a typical demand for cash to be placed in a nondescript bag. The thief had a very specific and unusual requirement for the return of the Duke. The letter stated that the painting would be returned safe and sound only if a charitable fund of £140,000 was established. This sum was exactly the price the government had paid for the painting. The thief demanded that this money be used to pay for television licenses for the elderly and the poor. The writer of the letter claimed that the theft was a protest against the government, prioritizing expensive art over the welfare of its senior citizens. The audacity of the demand stunned the authorities. This was a Robin Hood figure, stealing from the state to give to the poor. The police refused to negotiate with the thief, publicly stating that they would not bow to blackmail. However, behind closed doors, they were desperate. The thief sent more notes, taunting the police and proving he still possessed the masterpiece. He even sent a label from the back of the painting as proof of life. The correspondence revealed a character who was articulate, intelligent, and deeply frustrated with the social system. Yet the profile the police were building was of a sophisticated mastermind, which was a massive miscalculation that would blind them to the truth for years. For 4 long years, the painting remained missing. The portrait of the Duke of Wellington became a symbol of the unsolved mystery. It was referenced in pop culture and even appeared in the first James Bond film Dr. No, where it was displayed in the villain's lair, suggesting Dr. No had stolen it. The real thief must have chuckled at this cinematic nod. The investigation had gone cold, and the file was gathering dust. The public had largely moved on accepting that the Goya might never be seen again. The thief had successfully outsmarted the entire British establishment. Then in 1965, the saga took another dramatic turn. A package was left at a railway station in Birmingham. Inside was the missing painting minus its frame, but otherwise unharmed. The return was as mysterious as the theft. Shortly after the painting was recovered, a man walked into a police station in London and confessed to the crime. His name was Kempton Bunton. He was not a cat burglar or a criminal mastermind. He was a 61-year-old, disabled, retired bus driver from Newcastle. The police were incredulous. This heavy-set, bespectacled man did not fit their profile of an international art thief. Character Bible Kempton Bunton is a Caucasian male in his early 60s with a heavy-set build and a round face. He has thinning gray hair combed back and wears thick black rimmed glasses. He is dressed in a slightly rumpled gray wool suit with a white shirt and a dark tie, appearing like a working-class British man from the 1960s. Kempton Bunton told the police a remarkable story. He claimed that he had traveled to London from Newcastle and learned that the security guards at the National Gallery had a predictable routine. He said he had simply climbed through an unlocked bathroom window in the early hours of the morning. Once inside, he navigated the dark corridors until he found the Goya. He removed it from the wall and exited through the same window. He then allegedly took the painting to his lodgings, where he hid it in a wardrobe. The simplicity of his confession was disarming. Character Bible Kempton Bunton is a Caucasian male in his early 60s with a heavy-set build and a round face. He has thinning gray hair combed back and wears thick black rimmed glasses. He is dressed in a slightly rumpled gray wool suit with a white shirt and a dark tie, appearing like a working-class British man from the 1960s. The police were skeptical, but Kempton knew details that only the thief could know. He described the markings on the back of the canvas and the exact location of the window. He explained that his motivation was purely political. He had been campaigning for free television licenses for pensioners for years and had been ignored. He saw the purchase of the Goya as a gross misuse of public funds and decided to take action. He insisted that he never intended to keep the painting or sell it for personal gain. He only wanted to use it as leverage to help the poor. Character Bible Kempton Bunton is a Caucasian male in his early 60s with a heavy-set build and a round face. He has thinning gray hair combed back and wears thick black rimmed glasses. He is dressed in a slightly rumpled gray wool suit with a white shirt and a dark tie, appearing like a working-class British man from the 1960s. The trial of Kempton Bunton became a national spectacle. The courtroom was packed with journalists and curious onlookers. Kempton was represented by the brilliant defense barrister, Jeremy Hutchinson. The prosecution painted Kempton as a thief who sought to deprive the nation of its property. However, Hutchinson saw an opportunity to use a legal technicality that would turn the case on its head. The defense strategy hinged on the definition of theft under British law at the time. Under the law as it stood in 1965, theft was defined as taking property with the intention of permanently depriving the owner of it. Kempton Bunton maintained throughout the trial that he never intended to permanently deprive the National Gallery of the painting. He argued that he had always intended to return it once his conditions regarding the charity donation were met. This was a risky and unconventional defense, but Kempton was an unconventional defendant. He charmed the jury with his wit and his seemingly genuine concern for the elderly. Character Bible Kempton Bunton is a Caucasian male in his early 60s with a heavy-set build and a round face. He has thinning gray hair combed back and wears thick black rimmed glasses. He is dressed in a slightly rumpled gray wool suit with a white shirt and a dark tie, appearing like a working-class British man from the 1960s. During his testimony, Kempton described how he had cared for the painting, ensuring it was not damaged. He spoke passionately about the unfairness of the television license fee for those living on a fixed pension. He portrayed himself not as a criminal, but as a crusader for social justice who had been forced to take drastic measures. The jury listened intently. They saw a man who looked like their own grandfather standing in the dock, accused of a crime that seemed too big for him. The prosecution tried to dismantle his story, pointing out the sheer impossibility of an overweight 61-year-old man scaling the walls of the National Gallery. They argued that he must have had accomplices or that he was lying to protect someone else. But Kempton stuck to his story. He took full responsibility, claiming he acted alone. The courtroom drama culminated in the closing arguments, where the definition of intent was debated fiercely. When the jury returned with their verdict, the courtroom fell silent. In a stunning decision, they found Kempton Bunton not guilty of stealing the painting. The legal argument had worked. The jury believed, or chose to believe, that he did not intend to permanently keep the Goya. However, there was a catch. Kempton had not returned the frame. The frame was never found, and thus he could not argue he intended to return it. Character Bible Kempton Bunton is a Caucasian male in his early 60s with a heavy-set build and a round face. He has thinning gray hair combed back and wears thick black rimmed glasses. He is dressed in a slightly rumpled gray wool suit with a white shirt and a dark tie, appearing like a working-class British man from the 1960s. Consequently, Kempton was found guilty of the theft of the frame. The judge sentenced him to 3 months in prison. It was a remarkably light sentence for someone who had caused such a massive international incident. Kempton waved to the gallery as he was led away. He had won a moral victory, if not a complete legal one. The public reaction was mixed, with some condemning him as a criminal and others celebrating him as a folk hero. The case had a lasting impact on British law. as a direct result of the Kempton-Bunton trial and the loophole it exposed. The Parliament passed the Theft Act of 1968. This new legislation included a section that made it a crime to remove a display from a public building, regardless of the intent to return it. It became known colloquially as the Goya Clause, ensuring that no one could ever use the same defense again. Kempton-Bunton served his time and returned to Newcastle, where he lived out the rest of his days in relative obscurity. He died in 1976, taking the full secrets of the heist to his grave. Or so it seemed. For decades, the world believed that this retired bus driver had pulled off the impossible heist alone. But like many great mysteries, there was one final twist waiting to be revealed. In 2012, a confidential file from the Director of Public Prosecutions was released to the public under the Freedom of Information Act. This file contained a startling revelation that rewrote the history of the Goya theft. It turned out that Kempton-Bunton had not stolen the painting after all. The true thief was someone much closer to him, someone he had protected with his silence for his entire life. The file revealed that during the initial investigation, police had found fingerprints at the scene that did not match Kempton. Furthermore, in 1969, 3 years after the trial, Kempton's son, John Bunton, had confessed to the police that he was the one who actually stole the painting. John was 20 years old at the time of the theft. He had climbed the ladder and entered the window just as his father had described, but it was the athletic young man who performed the feat, not the elderly father. John Bunton explained that he had stolen the painting to help his father's campaign. When the heat from the police investigation became too intense and the painting became a burden, Kempton decided to take the fall. He knew that his son had a whole life ahead of him and would face a harsh prison sentence. Kempton figured that as an elderly man with a clean record, he would receive a lighter punishment or perhaps garner public sympathy. The police and prosecutors at the time decided not to pursue John Bunton. They had already secured a conviction against Kempton, albeit for the frame, and deemed it not in the public interest to reopen the embarrassing case. They buried the confession and let the official narrative stand. Kempton's sacrifice was absolute. He allowed the world to believe he was the thief to save his son from prison. This revelation transforms the story from a quirky heist into a profound tragedy of paternal love. Kempton-Bunton was indeed a hero, but not just for his campaign against television license fees. He was a father who was willing to destroy his own reputation and go to prison to protect his child. The image of the bumbling old thief was a carefully constructed mask worn to deceive the law and shield his family. The story of the stolen Duke of Wellington remains one of the most fascinating tales in true crime history. It combines the thrill of a high-stakes heist with the absurdity of a ransom for charity and the emotional depth of a family secret. The painting hangs once again in the National Gallery, a silent witness to the events of 1961. Visitors who gaze upon the stern face of the Duke likely have no idea of the incredible drama that once surrounded this canvas. In the end, the thief who tried to sell the stolen item back to the owner was not trying to enrich himself. He was trying to enrich society, and when that failed, he enriched the definition of fatherhood. Kempton-Bunton may not have been the master thief the world thought he was, but he was a master of sacrifice. His legacy is not just a footnote in legal textbooks, but a testament to the lengths a parent will go to for their child. As we look back on this case, we are left with a lingering question about the nature of justice. Was justice served when Kempton went to prison for a crime he did not commit? Or was a higher form of justice achieved through his act of love? The midnight docket is closed on the case of the Goya theft, but the human story behind it continues to resonate, reminding us that Behind every headline, there is a truth far more complex than we can imagine.